Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I want to start with a question. Do you ever have, let's say, a big fight with your partner, and then it's not resolved? Then you wake up in the morning and both of you just act like it didn't happen. Anybody? Or maybe you have unexpressed expectations and desires of what your partner or your friends or your family might do for you, but they don't do it, and then you're disappointed. Anybody? Well, what we're talking about and what I'm talking about in this episode is the danger of having silent agreements with people. I'm also going to be breaking down what are silent agreements, what are expressed agreements, and I'm going to give you some questions so you can understand where you're doing this in your life, because it is bad for you and bad for your relationship. So before we get started, if you happen to be new to this YouTube channel, well, hello and welcome. Please introduce yourself in the comments. We are a very friendly group. Please make sure that you subscribe and hit the bell so that you don't miss anything that's new. And I roll out new stuff every Tuesday and every Thursday, and I wouldn't want you to miss a thing. And if you are new here, my name is Terri Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, and the author of Boundary Boss, which you can get at boundarybossbook.com. So I love to highlight your questions and your comments. You guys know I read everything. So this is a comment from Linda Gross under the video, 7 Happiness Habits to Try Today. Hey Terri, I do most of the 7 happiness habits, and I'm doing the work to expand and continue to curate my happiness. All your podcasts, newsletter, boundary book, and courses have deeply changed me for the better. Amazing, Linda. I have boundaries and even heard my brother apologize to me, and my mom apologized too. Wow. I continue to read my notes and the Boundary Boss Bill of Rights. It's on my phone so I can refer to it easily. Thank you for helping me find me. Well, Linda, I am so excited for you, and I am so grateful that you took the time to write in and tell us what's happening for you and how you're feeling. Right on. All right, let's move it on into today's content. So, silent agreements, what are they? Let's just establish that first. Silent agreements are the unspoken agreements and assumed rules of engagement that we have in our relationships. A silent agreement is usually one that you have not vocally agreed to or verbally expressed. So, a lot of times we have relationships or families of origin that didn't do a lot of talking. I know my family of origin didn't. So I've had many clients who, came from families with disordered boundaries or addiction issues or whatever it is. And there may be like a huge brawl the night before, or someone's like falling down drunk. And the next morning, their mother's like, "Hi, how do you want your eggs?" No conversation about what happened. And how this is bad for us, there's a million different ways how it's not good for us. But when you think about what happens, especially when you're a kid, you have an experience, you hear fighting, you hear someone drunk, you hear something breaking, and then the next morning, no one acknowledges it. So now you are learning, someone is teaching you that we don't talk about those things. And making and maintaining silent agreements in our relationships is really a learned behavior. It's something that we saw. Most of us, if you've done it, because I certainly had it in my life until I had a lot of therapy, this is how it is. These are things we don't talk about. So if you're struggling now, it probably means that you witnessed this or experienced this dysfunctional behavior as a pattern growing up. In my family of origin, certainly there was a silent agreement that we wouldn't talk about anything that was too messy, right? And no one was allowed to express anger. That was also part of the way it was when I was growing up. But if you grew up and it's almost like your reality was not acknowledged, right? There's a certain amount of denial when we don't talk about the stuff that's going on. And it teaches you to deny how you feel or what you think. I would be too afraid to ask questions about things, so you just sort of slough over it. You learn to hide your head in the sand to a degree. At least I did in my family of origin. And this is something that is damaging because it isn't like I didn't have those experiences, and it isn't like you don't remember what happened. It just means you're taught to sort of stuff what happens. So silent agreements create disordered emotional boundaries and miscommunication, right? We don't know what's going on with other people because we're making a lot of assumptions about them, or we're anticipating a certain reaction to them, so we just avoid the conversation, right? Like at the top of this, I was talking about if you had a fight with your partner and you didn't resolve it, and then you went to bed, and then in the morning you both act like it didn't happen. That disagreement, those feelings, they don't go anywhere, right? They're still within you and they're still unresolved. So I want you to look at, and part of what I'm going to be teaching you in this episode is you need to identify in your life, where do you have silent agreements? There's certain cultural aspects of this as well, because there are certain cultures that are way more open. And I would say, if we were just looking at like European and North American, a lot of European culture, maybe not English, but European meaning Spanish cultures, there's the possibility that there's more openness to having conversations about what is really going on. Where I would say North America, and certainly in a more waspy culture, and that's sort of where I'm from, there's a lot of things that it is considered gauche to talk about. It's considered like in bad form to talk about these things. And that's even within the family. So I'm not even just talking about like what you talk about publicly. It's what you're talking about privately. So the same way that we have downloaded blueprints around all the other things, boundaries, how we relate to finances, relationships, we have a downloaded blueprint around silent agreements. So in the guide, you can go to terricole.com/guide. I'm going to give you some questions so that you can start to identify if this resonates with you, like, yes, I'm doing this. You can start to identify, where did it start? Where did you learn it? Because it really does matter. We need to have a deeper self-understanding if we want to change something, because it can be very difficult, especially the things that are ingrained in us in childhood. I also think that there's a lot of disappointment that we can avoid, because other ways that we have sort of silent expectations, a little bit different than silent agreements, but silent expectations is like you have a long day at work and you get home and there's a sink full of dishes, which might not normally make you upset, but maybe today because you're exhausted it did. And now you're pissed because your partner should have done them. Now suddenly in your mind. And now instead of having the conversation or texting and saying, hey babe, I've had a really long day. If there's dishes, can you do them? It's basically making all these assumptions about what your partner should know about where you are right now, about what you experienced today, and you haven't even talked to them. So this sets us up for disappointment, but it also sets our partner up to feel bad about not doing a thing that they didn't read our mind to do. So we can be frustrated and be like, they're not holding up their end of the bargain, but it actually was not an expressed bargain. Unless it's their job to do the dishes and your job to do something else, that's a different situation. But what I'm seeing most of the time in my therapy practice is that there's an expectation that the other person will read your mind and that you won't have to say what it is that you want. So these unexpressed expectations set everyone up to fail. They set you up to be frustrated, but they also set the other person up to feel like a jerk, even though they haven't really done anything wrong. So when we take a closer look at silent agreements, what do they do for us? Like, what is the secondary gain of being in a silent agreement? Well, it spares everyone having a hard conversation. And the thing is, as we know, that is a short-term plan and it's a short-term gain because it creates long-term dysfunction, miscommunication, frustration, hurt feelings. But it's like this short-term gain. You don't have to have the conversation in the short term. So we don't want that. This life and healthy relationships, you guys, you know this. This shit is a long game. Our short-term fixes don't work in a long game. We need to go, how do I want to be interacting on a daily basis? So I'm going to give you some ways that you can identify the silent agreements of what you are doing right now in your life. Because the truth, when it comes to the way that we feel, what we need, what do I always say? There's only two options. We can either talk them out or we will act them out. Those are the only two choices. So it's not like never having that conversation that you need to have is something that makes sense, because it actually doesn't. You're going to have to do something in some way, because here's the thing. We will act out those things, and a lot of times we do it in these covert behaviors, these passive-aggressive ways of communicating it. What happens when we do that is that there's a high probability of being misunderstood, or certainly not being understood accurately, or letting the other person know that we're pissed off with these behaviors, but they don't know the specifics of why. So we need clean and expressed agreements in our relationships. And when we have them, the likelihood of us being more understood in a real way, being happier, being healthier, it's just so much greater. And you can learn to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is just raise your awareness about where you might be doing this. So in the guide, I'm going to give you some questions that you can basically ask yourself, which is, how often are you in a silent agreement with the people in your life, right? And sometimes, and I'm breaking down the question so it's easier for you to answer, because you may not be able to answer that one. Like, when you really want someone to do something for you, do you think that they should just intuit it, that they should understand it without you expressing it, or they should just know because you think it's obvious? Then you're going to make a list of who you sort of do that with. Who do you let offensive comments pass, right? Telling yourself that they didn't mean anything by it, or that you don't want to make a big deal. Again, this is a silent agreement where they're going to say something that's totally offensive and you are silently agreeing that you're not going to say anything about it, even though you are offended. So you're going to make a list of those people, and making a list about these assumptions that we have about others, right? Who might we think that these people have the same values as us, even though we don't actually have that evidence? Again, this brings us back to positive projection, which I've talked about in other episodes, where we are positively projecting, right? We're projecting onto other people sort of our positive attributes, even though we don't actually know that they have them. And then I think what will really be revealing for you about the silent agreement is answering some of the blueprint questions, right? This is learned behavior. Where did you learn it? So all of that is going to be for you in the guide. Go to terricole.com/guide, and you will answer those questions, because part of it is it's very personal to you. This is not something that I can say, oh, everyone has this or they have it this exact way. A lot of families interact in this way, but it's unique to you, right? We don't want to be communicating in this covert way. I found that with coming from my family of origin, of having a decent amount of silent agreements, especially around painful or messy conversations. There was a lot when I was growing up, my older sisters acting out, running away, like doing lots of different things. And there would not be a lot of conversation about it. So for me, that created a scarier situation. I would try to talk to my sisters about it, but I knew I couldn't really talk to my parents about it. This is when my parents were still together. And I learned that that was a way of dealing with unpleasant topics or things that I didn't know how to handle. And all of that I needed to unlearn in therapy, because in the first few long-term relationships that I had, my whole way I related to them was silent agreements and unexpressed expectations. And so, of course, I was always left in a position of not getting my needs met, being upset, feeling unimportant. There were so many things that came along with it. And I remember my college boyfriend being like, Terri, it's so unfair that you expect me to read your mind. Like, I don't know what's going on if you don't tell me. And I remember at the time just being like, well, you should, basically, was my answer. And of course, years later, I was like, oh, poor him. Like, that's not that much fun to be on the receiving end of. And it took a minute to understand where I was doing this, why I was doing it in therapy, and then learning to say, hey, let's talk about this, or let's make expressed agreements about whatever the thing was. By the time I got into a relationship with my husband, Victor, I was already in my early 30s, and I'd had a lot of therapy since I got into therapy at 19. So I was able to just have those conversations and get my needs met by being able to tell Vic what my needs were. And instead of the silent agreements and being pissed off about stuff where he was confused, I was able to have expressed and clean agreements. And that is another thing that I'll be putting in the guide with you. Like, what does it look like to have clean agreements? It means you're not making assumptions. It means you're actually having the conversation. And yeah, you know what? You're right. It does make you vulnerable, because this is the thing. If we think about what would the secondary gain of not having expressed agreements is not having to have those conversations, right? We don't have to do the thing that we feel like we can't do. But here's the thing. You can do it. You are completely capable of doing it. You just need a little bit of a guide. So once we identify where we're not expressing what we need or what we want, then you can learn to figure out what are the right scripts for you, and you can learn to verbalize what it is that you want. Because here's the thing, the amount of frustration and anger that goes along with having these unexpressed agreements, having these unexpressed expectations, it's really negatively impacts the quality of your life. And with a couple of simple changes, right, you can have a simple and calm conversation, an open dialogue, actively listening to the other person. Now, simple doesn't always mean easy, but you can do it. And if you are an empath or a highly sensitive person, silent agreements are so incredibly real, because we are naturally so attuned to what the other person wants. And it can be so easy to sort of self-abandon or throw ourselves under the bus because we're worried. We can feel this emotional pressure within ourselves to sort of acquiesce or give in because we're so hypersensitive to the way other people feel. So it's especially important, if you identify as an empath or an HSP, a highly sensitive person, that you get clear about where you might be participating in silent agreements that are not in your best interests, right? And not in the best interest of your relationships, your friendships, your career, whatever it may be. So I have everything for you in the guide. I'm really curious to see your 2 cents on silent versus expressed or clean agreements. So drop me comments in all the places. You can tag me on Instagram. Let me know that you listened or watched this episode and what your thoughts are on it. I hope this added value to your life and that you guys have an amazing week. And as always, take care of you.